trying to think about what to talk about on the way down here, and I figured, I'm going to talk about startups. Some of you guys are all in the early stage, and I've been in the early stage a couple times. Still in the early stage, depending on how you define it. So I jotted down 8 different kind of lessons I kind of had to learn the hard way, I guess, and I'll try to tell some stories about it and see if maybe a couple of them are useful for each of you. And then afterwards, just want to open it up for questions. You guys can ask anything about startups or Bitcoin or whatever, and then I'll probably stick around a bit afterwards. I know a lot of you guys are using the Coinbase API, so love to get in there and like write some code with some of you if you guys are up for it. So, by the way, quick background on Coinbase. We're about a year old, and I was working on it before that for about 6 months, sort of on nights and weekends. I was an engineer at Airbnb, and was sort of like desperately looking for co-founders around that time and all that. And sort of my 30th birthday was coming up, and so I was like, man, I'm turning 30. Like I haven't started my company. I'm a fraud, basically. Like I was telling people I'm going to start a company, and so that kind of gave me the motivation to go out and do it. And so yeah, we're about a year in right now. We just raised a $5 million Series A about 3 months ago from Armstrong Ventures. We got about 5 or 6 people full-time, a couple contractors, and we're helping people move about $25 million a month into an average Bitcoin. We've got about 200,000 users. So that's us. And let's jump into some of the things I've been thinking about. So I'm 30 years old now. I've started a couple startups before this. Some of them were really quick. Other times in my life, I've just been an employee. And one of the things that I started to do more recently was basically think longer term. So that was the number one thing I wrote down was think longer term. I guess I talked with a lot of people about their startup ideas, and a lot of times they tell me like the real thing I want to do is I want to change education, but like I just need to get something going first. And so this is like a really simple idea. I could just bang this out really quick and launch it, but it's not like my real passion. And in their mind, they're thinking like this is going to be a 3 or 6 month little project I'm gonna put out there, and it's gonna do something and be successful, and then I can really go on to the next thing. And in my experience, that's complete bullshit. Like there's no project ever that has been successful that has really taken that short period of time. And I was always caught up in that mentality. I think I was like kind of ADD, like around when I was in my 25, 26, 27, in that age. I had probably a new startup every 3 to 6 months. I had some new little project, I'd put it out there on GitHub or launched it on my blog or whatever. And like, I guess it was valuable in the sense that I was learning a lot, but I had a false belief in my head that like, one of these things would just like blow up, and everybody would suddenly rush to it, and like that would be the one that did it. And now that I've met more and more entrepreneurs, I've realized there's basically no situation where that happens. Every startup that actually achieves success eventually went through like at least a 2 or 3 year period where basically nothing worked, and they were broke, and like they pivoted a bunch of times, and they should have given up. Like any rational person should have given up during that time frame. Like nothing was working, and their co-founders were leaving, and nobody wanted to invest, and like the only companies that actually make it are the ones that are thinking longer term. And so when I thought about Coinbase, the next project I was going to work on, I was like, I need to pick something that I'm actually going to love doing, even if for like 2 or 3 years, like there's no signs of success really along the way, because that seems to be the only way people are going to do it. So I actually made a bet. I was in another incubator, and somebody suggested this idea to us. I can't remember. So there was another company in the batch that I kind of had become friends with, and we made this bet on the last day of the incubator, and we said, all right, we're going to work on our companies for at least 2 years, and at the end of the 2 year mark, we're going to like, if something's not working, we're going to reevaluate and say like maybe we should change. But at least like we know we put in really 2 years, and it's not like we got discouraged after 3 months, and nobody's ever going to make that work. So I sent these guys like a calendar invite in Google Calendar for 2 years in the future, and the calendar invite says like we drink Dom Perignon on a boat. It's basically, so the bet is if those guys quit their company in 2 years up to then, they have to buy me a bottle of Dom Perignon. If I quit my company up until 2 years, I have to buy them a bottle of Dom Perignon, and if we're both still doing our companies, like we're both going to drink it on a boat somewhere in San Francisco Bay. So it's kind of a dumb bet, but like even at the last day of the incubator, we were thinking like, we have to think longer term. So that was like my first lesson, I guess. So the second one I wrote down is, I think people need to work on bigger ideas and harder ideas. So there's a woman I spoke with last weekend about her startup, and she was telling me that, like, I hope I'm not going to say someone's idea or something related, but she said, you know how like you're always thinking about books or movies you should read, and like there should be an app where you jot them down and you keep a list of them so you can do that later. And like maybe there's a good idea there, maybe there's not, but like in the back of my head I was thinking like you're just not solving a big problem, right? Like I have the Notes app on my iPhone, I can email it to myself. Like yes, your solution is probably like 20% better than that or 50% better, but I'm not going to like go install another app if there's something that's like 80% as good, right? I don't have a burning need for it. And so I guess like, nobody's going to switch from an incumbent unless your app is drastically better in some way. It can't just be like 20% better. It has to be like twice as good, probably. Otherwise, it's just not worth it for them to switch and have that whole hassle. There's a second corollary to this, which is like work on harder ideas. I've noticed a lot of times, and I did this too in my life, was I kind of gravitated towards ideas where the solution would be fun to build, like from a technology point of view or something like that. And I always said like, in my head it was more just like, man, I could like build this really cool thing in like jQuery or Rails or like whatever tech I was just learning. And I was building an app like that was in search of a solution, if that makes sense. So to give you like a small example, when we were working on Coinbase, a bunch of people were telling us like, that's a regulated field, like you're gonna get like all these auditors coming and harassing you, and you have to get like money transmitter licenses in all these states, and it's gonna be like millions of dollars and like on legal fees and years of work to get that done. And like, yes, that's the whole point. I mean, that's how you build a defensible business, is like you do something that's really shitty and hard that like nobody else wants to do, right? So if your idea is kind of simple and you feel like you could, there's always a V1 that's like the minimum viable product. But if like the ultimate idea is a little bit too easy, like it's not defensible and it's not worth anything. It's not worth money if you're not solving a hard problem. So I always try to encourage people to think about bigger and harder ideas. So the third one I wrote down is that engineering alone won't get you there. And like I'm an engineer, I always had this bias when I was working at other companies as an engineer where like, I don't know if you guys have ever felt this, but you're always like, man, I'm doing like the real work, and like there's these jerk off guys like just doing phone calls all day, like biz dev, like that's not even real work, like, and like the sales marketing guys or whatever, engineers, we always have this chip on our shoulder kind of, right? That we're the only ones doing like the real work. And that's complete bullshit. So I've talked with a lot of engineers, like in their first company, when they kind of leave and they go do something, is they're kind of like, I'm not gonna like, have any co-founders or anything. I'm just going to build this cool tech, and like if you build it, they will come kind of mentality. And that's sort of a dangerous mentality to get into, right? Because I mean, I think you're hard pressed to find an example of a company that just like built great tech and then everybody just flocked to it without any kind of harder work or like meeting with customers or going out and getting investors or anything like that. And you shouldn't sell yourself short either as an engineer, because like all that other stuff you can learn. Like if you're not really good at, I don't know, I'd never raised money. I think Adam was like the third VC I ever met with my whole life or something like that.
He stole.
Yeah. So you can do all that stuff and learn it, but I guess don't get caught in this trap of I'm an engineer and I don't need anybody else. Like that's a dangerous thing. All right, so the fourth thing I wrote down was being controversial is okay, and it's probably maybe good. I think the biggest risk is that you'll launch your app and like nobody will care. What's a much better outcome is like you'll launch your app and like some people hate it and some people love it. Like at least they're talking about it, like that's a much better outcome. So if you're building an app and people are just kind of like, yeah, it seems like a good idea, and it's not controversial in any way, it also means like they don't care about it, really. Like if I came out with an app that did photo sharing a little bit better or like note-taking or something like that, and it didn't like solve some burning desire for people, and nobody hated it, like that's kind of a little bit of a red flag. All right, so I want to talk about co-founders a little bit next, because that was something that was like really hard for me, and I had to spend a lot of time failing on that one. So the way I wrote it down here is it's better to be married than single, but it's better to be single than in a bad relationship. So the way my co-founder search kind of went was, so I had done a startup like when I was in college, and I had another co-founder, and we're still friends to this day, but we weren't like really good business partners, and so I always had this thought like, oh, I'm doing all the work and he's not, and for whatever reason it didn't really work out. We kind of broke off on amicable terms, but I think for many years I had this idea in my head where I was like, you know what, like I don't need a co-founder. If you're Mark Zuckerberg did it, and I can do it too, and I'll build a team of great people to fill out all the things that I don't know how to do, right? And my thinking on that has changed as I've gotten like older a little bit, and I definitely feel like people problems are like super hard. Finding the right co-founder is incredibly hard, and building the right team is incredibly hard, but it's still worth it. It's like actually the only way you can ever build something like really meaningful, I think. And so just to give you a quick summary of my co-founder search on Coinbase, I think I literally for like 2 years met with somebody almost like once a week, call it like that, like co-founder dating type stuff. And it really sucked. I mean, I was basically going on like dates with dudes like every weekend. And afterwards I'd be like, do I like him? Like he seemed pretty good. And like sometimes we'd have like second or third dates and stuff like that. And we actually even ended up like forming a company like one of these, and that one didn't work out. And like those were the hardest times in my life. If I think about like raising money, like that was really hard, but didn't even hold a candle to like breaking up with a co-founder, or just being uncertain about whether anybody cares about the product or whatever. Like the worst time probably in my whole life was like breaking up with a co-founder, and it was just like, it was so stressful, and there was legal issues, and like I remember feeling like I didn't even want to like eat or sleep or anything, and like I just felt like sick to my stomach. It was like devastating. Have you ever seen somebody go through like a horrible breakup or something like that, right? So all that stuff is like a huge burden, and then you have to like get up back on your feet and go start trying to find the right person. And I have like an amazing co-founder right now. So he ended up being like the first engineer who joined the company, and then it turned out he's like a total badass and like way better at pitching and finance and like product decisions than I am. So it turned out to be really, really good. And I heard one piece of advice one time that really stuck with me about how do you know if you have the right co-founder. And actually, Max Levchin said this in some talk that he gave, but he said you should feel like maybe you want to try to impress that other person a little bit. Like you're almost a little bit intimidated by them. And if you ever meet with somebody and they're just like pretty good and cool friend, that's maybe like not quite the right feeling you want to have. You want to be like, oh my God, like I can't believe this person's like super impressive. I don't want to say anything dumb around them. They might think I'm an idiot, right? Like you almost want to have that level of respect with a co-founder if you can do it. So I wanted to convey that one from Max Levchin. Okay, number 6 out of 8. So I wrote down it's a marathon, not a sprint. So what this basically means is that I think I'm about a year into Coinbase right now, and I was working on it nights and weekends before that, about 6 months. And I think right around like the 1 year mark, if you count the first 6 as well, I think there was like this period I went with like 30 days where I hadn't taken a day off. And I remember just like waking up in the morning and I was like, this is not fun, Like I didn't want to do it anymore. I was like depressed. I was like, this sucks. And like luckily I had this roommate at the time who was like, come with me. Like we're going hiking. Like get the fuck out of the house. Basically, like stop looking at your computer. Like go get sun. And I realized like that was dangerous, And so like, it's sort of, my first point was about thinking longer term. If this is going to be like a 5 or 10 year endeavor before you really start to see any payoff from it, like you need to set some rules for yourself where you actually don't just like work all the time. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out and depressed. So the stuff that for me, like the rules I set for myself is like at least 2 days a week I go exercise. That seems to help a lot. Like even if it's just like midnight or something and I've been working late, I'm like, I gotta do it. And like I'll go run or like exercise. I don't even care about the health benefits. It's like purely just to reduce stress like in my life. And we all as a team go rock climbing once a week, and like we do something active. So that's like the first thing. And then we try to eat well and have some kind of thing there. And there's one or two other things that we have really helped. Like usually at least one day on the weekend, I'll try not to look at my email at all. And try not to do any work stuff unless it's just like meeting with somebody for coffee or something fun like that. So I've noticed a couple times I've gotten to this point where like I don't want to get out of bed, or it's not fun anymore. And like if you just go exercise, you take a couple days off, like you'll come back so refreshed, and you have to make sure you do that. Otherwise, you're not going to make it to the 5-year mark, which is what you have to do to have any success, like whatsoever. So number 7 I wrote down is hire slowly. And I think way more companies, it's way easier to die from making a bad hire than it is to like miss out on a great hire. I think most companies I've seen wait too heavily towards just like hiring when they're not sure. And there was 2 startups I worked at before I did Coinbase, Airbnb and Carwoo, another YC company. And like the difference in how they both started and hired was like day and night. So at Carwoo, I remember, this core team that started off was amazing. It was like really high quality entrepreneurs and engineers and designers. It was like maybe 5 of us, and like it was fun. It was an amazing environment. Like little stuff like at lunch, when these discussions would happen, sometimes you can have like 3 or 4 people in a discussion that are all like really smart, like top of their game, A players, and like ideas are just being formed, and it's great. And then if one person is in that group who is like not an A player, it can actually derail the whole conversation. And because you have to explain something that they weren't flowing like quickly as quickly as everybody else or whatever. And Carwoo made that mistake, in my opinion. They started hiring people who were B players. Like they had to build out like a sales team really fast, and they were just like throwing bodies in there off of Craigslist without very little interviewing. I mean, their mentality was like, let's hire like 10 people and just fire anybody who doesn't work out. And it basically like wreaked havoc on the company culture. Even aside from sales team, stuff, it was just like, it was hiring B players. And so one of my Airbnb strategy in contrast was like night and day. I mean, if we had this motto there that like every hire should raise the bar, and so they had to be like smarter than you basically, or at least much better at you than something. And we also had this mentality at the end. We would say like if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And at Coinbase, we wrote down like some hiring criteria too, and I'll just read it to you really quick, because we've been pretty slow to hire, and so far we haven't had a bad hire, which can actually be like an unrecoverable mistake, I think, in the first 10 people. So the hiring values we wrote down were, and you have to like ask yourself this when you leave the interview: is this person way better than me at least one thing? Second one is, did I learn something in the interview? Sometimes we meet people that are like, they're in biz dev or something, and like they seem great, like they interview well, and it's like, did they actually like teach you something you didn't know? That's a hard one. Did you leave feeling inspired and like more excited or higher energy than when you went in? The fourth one is the airplane test. Like, how would you feel about sitting next to this person on an airplane for like 5 hours? And the fifth one is, are they a badass? And like, usually we try to have people, if you can say yes to like 4 out of 5 of those, then we move on to the next round. And usually every employee so far has done a 2-week contract period where they actually just try working with us for like two whole weeks before we say yes. And we have about a 50% yes rate after that. Okay, so the last one I wrote down, number 8, and then we can talk about any questions you guys have or whatever you want to talk about, is this concept of escape velocity. So you probably remember like rocket ships, they have to like hit this certain speed before they can get out of orbit. And if you don't hit escape velocity, you just like kind of tumble back to the Earth with gravity. And the reason why I like that term is that I feel like doing a startup creates so much energy in the early stage and there's like, you're fragile, like you're this little teetering thing on the launch pad, and there's so many things that can kill you that you need to like build this massive store of energy before you go off and do this startup. And then you just give it everything you've got, and once you're kind of in like orbit, then it's a lot harder to kill you. Like you've raised a Series A, you've got 10 people, like it's okay if one leaves now. It's not okay, but it's like it's not lethal, right? And you can really just start to build from there. But I see a lot of people, and basically what happens is if your startup doesn't work out, which I've had a number of those that haven't worked out, you don't like go right back and try to do another startup. You basically, I let the pendulum swing back the other way, and like, in my life at least, I've gone and gotten a job somewhere. And like, I try to pick a startup where you can learn something, like a fast growing startup. Like for me, it was Airbnb. And basically what you're there to do is like recharge, right? Like both finances, your mental energy, like your motivation, your networking, and then you spend a year, 2, 3, whatever there, and then now let this pendulum swing back the other way and like put all your energy to getting another startup off the ground, and see if that one you can hit escape velocity. But like I've seen some people like they tried one and it didn't work. The pendulum was swinging back, and they tried to go right back into another one, and it was always like a weaker push the second time because you're just drained, So be aware of that escape velocity, and like maintain your energy and strength, and like put everything into getting to that escape velocity when you're young and fragile. So that's all I had written down, and like happy to take any questions from you guys. Yeah.
What do you think of the cryptocurrency space outside of Bitcoin?
I mean, it's taking off, right? Like, there's all kinds of cool things happening. So, is there anything in particular? Which one you want to talk about, or?
Any of them,
yeah.
Coin.
So, I mean, I don't think any of them I've seen yet are gonna like overtake Bitcoin, but they're interesting in either niche cases or kind of like silver to gold, or something like that. I think other things like Ripple are pretty interesting, not maybe in its current iteration, but an idea like it. So in general, I feel like cryptocurrency is this thing that's kind of been invented, and we can't uninvent it or ever go back. So we've almost entered like this cryptocurrency era where a whole bunch of shit is going to start to happen. It's almost like TCP/IP getting invented or something like that, and then who knows? Like we could have never predicted Twitter or eBay on top of that, but stuff like more and more stuff's going to happen for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Coinbase grew really fast. I guess recently with a big push this spring.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of attention on it, especially from the hacker news type community. And I saw some of what felt like almost withering attacks on what is Coinbase doing. I was curious, what was it like to go through rapid growth, and then how did you handle kind of like the public, just the stress of trying to keep the company moving forward and all the stresses around?
Yeah, so we definitely had some dark days there, and it was a combination of things. It was so we were going through hyper growth. There was basically this swarm of news that went all over the world about Bitcoin. Roman was participating in a lot of this too, and yeah, I mean, basically our back end just kind of crumbled in certain places, and with the growth. And so there was this great analogy about, you're building a startup is like driving a car down the freeway at 75 miles an hour and trying to rebuild the car while it's going that fast. So we had a lot of moments like that where we were just looking at this thing kind of crumbling. The database is at 110 CPU usage or something. And we're like, all right, there's got to be a Band-Aid fix that'll just buy us 4 hours to try to figure out what the real issue is. And so there was a lot of kind of moments like that. But I remember it definitely felt a little bit like going through war or something like that, because you would just get, we have pager duty. You get woken up at 4 in the morning, and then again at 6 in the morning. And then like do not disturb on my phone is like one of my favorite features on iOS, because sometimes like you have to actually just get like a bit of sleep, and there's just like the phone won't stop ringing and stuff like that. I remember one crazy thing that happened too was like, so I don't know if you guys ever, there was some story that came out about like a data breach or something at Coinbase. I don't know if any of you guys saw this.
Some of the sellers buttons.
Yeah. Yeah. So somebody, posted on Reddit like massive data breach at Coinbase, and like everyone's customer information is exposed, right? And I actually got a text from Adam at like 7 a.m. or something. I don't know why you were up. He's like, bro, check the homepage. Like, so, and then my co-founder was also like randomly up at that time to do like an interview with Canadian TV or something. And he texted me too. He's like, yeah, check it out, like see what's up. So I had this like sinking feeling like, fuck, like somebody leaked the whole user database or something like that. And I started looking through it, and it was actually like not a big deal at all. Like the merchant profile pages were intentionally public, and it was like a misinterpretation. And so the frenzy was like just starting to build, you know, and like it was like VentureBeat had just posted something, and like it was front page on the Hacker News. It was like front page on Reddit, Bitcoin. And there was like people tweeting out shit like, it's over, like Coinbase is done, like just give the investors back all their money, like cease all operations, like you guys blew it. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, all right, we got to come out with like a measured response to this and just like try to nip it in the bud, you know? And I remember there's this, somebody I met who did PR at like Twilio and a bunch of companies, and she gave this talk one time. And like her big point of the talk was, whenever the mob is kind of like after you, don't like try to get your side of the story in and like be like, no, it wasn't our fault because like this and this, like it's only gonna make it worse. Like when the mob is after you, like all you should do is give like the best apology you can ever give, and just completely, you know, like dogs like lay on their back when they submit or whatever. Just roll over. Give them like the most one-sided apology you can possibly give, and don't try to like put any jabs in there like with your side of the story or anything. So we were kind of like drafting this blog post, like 7 in the morning. I've slept for like 3 hours, and we just like, you know, basically the gist of it was like, we fucked up. I'm sorry. And the reality was like, we didn't really. I mean, there was like some misinterpretations, some stuff we should have done better probably, but I tried to make it just like completely roll over, you know, like to the masses. And I listed like all the bullet points, like what are we going to do to fix this? Like this is the first thing, this is the second thing, this is the third thing. So we put it out, and then I respond on like Hacker News and Reddit, and like the mob starts reading it, and like a few people start to come in and like defend us. And they're like, whoa, wait a second, like did you read the fucking blog post? Like you guys, I think I figured out what happened. Like these pages are supposed to be public. Like, you know, and I'm like, upvote, okay. But like the annoying part was like in the meantime, the Washington Post, VentureBeat, and like somebody else, I don't know who, Business Insider or something, like had all posted articles saying like Coinbase has leaked customer transaction data, which was like libelous and false. And so we like reached out to those journalists, and it was like, again, the same, your mentality is to like kind of yell at them and be like, no, you fucked up, like you don't understand, you know? And like you have to, when you do that, it's like those journalists are just waiting for an email like that. They'll like, statement from like Coinbase CEO, like you guys are fucking idiots and you don't understand what happened. And then like the mob is back, right? And so like it was really annoying. I mean, it took like 3 or 4, or like 5 days in some cases. Like finally, the Washington Post posted a correction or whatever they call it in journalism. I don't know. Basically says like they posted something wrong. And they find it didn't matter, right? Like nobody who reads like the Washington Post article is going to come back like a week later and, oh, I was incorrect. Like there's now a statement there, but it was just ridiculous. I mean, like their entire source for that conclusion they reached was like a guy who made a post on Reddit. So anyway.
So that sort of brings up, so a lot of startups try to use press to their advantage.
Yeah.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on PR or press and how you should use it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm still figuring that out myself. But like, I know that we could be doing a better job. I mean, in general, so I'm sort of like learning this on the fly too, but my only thoughts on it are like, try to cultivate relationships with journalists, right? Like if you do know somebody, try to provide value to them. The only way I know of really to provide value to journalists is like, give them interesting stories that like nobody else has. They all love this idea of getting, breaking a story before anybody else gets it. For whatever reason, that's like crack to journalists. And if you give them like an exclusive or they tell them like, hey, this is like an important trend with no benefit to you whatsoever, It could be one of the other companies in your batch or something and like help out your buddies. But if you give them that, then they'll kind of be on your list. And then one other thing that we do, every time we've met a journalist like this, where we do like a quick interview with them, we add them on this email list. We just use like media@coinbase.com, and it's we're the only ones who can send to it. And then basically, if we ever want to like announce something, we can just send like a 2-sentence thing to that list, and it's all the journalists that we have like some kind of warm connection with, and we can be like, hey, we're about to announce like recurring billing. It's a first in the Bitcoin world. Like, any interest? And then they just sort of see a regular stream of like stuff from you. So that's the only shit I've figured out. But I'm trying to hire somebody who's like really knows what they're doing in PR. So yeah.
So you guys were probably one of the first Bitcoin businesses to actually raise funding, and you kind of like paved the way for the rest of us to not seem as crazy to investors. I'm curious, like that beginning part when you were just starting to raise funding, do you have any like war stories or like what was that like? Because it's not just that you're working on a startup, but you're working on like this Bitcoin startup, which obviously is never going to work. And so I'm curious.
Yeah. No, I mean, we definitely got like a lot of crazy looks. I distinctly remember going to this networking event, and like there was a bunch of investors there and stuff. This was probably like towards the end of last summer, and there was like some drinks being served and stuff like that. And I was like talking to these guys about my company, and I think I realized after like 30 seconds they were basically making fun of me, like no joke. Like they were asking me these questions and then like kind of like giggling, like looking at each other and laughing. Like they were basically trolling me. Like, oh yeah, and like how do you think you're going to enter like these emerging markets? Like, and so they thought it was like a total joke, basically. But like the tone quickly changed. I mean, basically we did a lot of meetings. Probably for every 10 meetings we did, like one person said yes and invested. So we got like lots of no's. And then a lot of the meetings we went in, they were just like, what is Bitcoin? We don't even know what that is. And we'd spend the whole meeting teaching them about it. And we never got any of those people to say yes. Like the only ones that said yes were people who we kind of went in and they at least had some knowledge about it and got comfortable. And then it was crazy how fast things changed. Like once we had a term sheet and then like 2 term sheets, and then everybody wanted in after that. And it was like really annoying to me because like 2 weeks earlier, nobody even wanted to like return our phone calls. So yeah, there was like at least probably eight VCs who reached out again after that, people who had like just never returned our emails or anything. And they were like, we were looking at it again and like we'd love to chat further, and like they literally wouldn't even call me back. Like, so I don't know. I think that's like maybe normal. I don't know. It's like when they see something is big, like now they have a fear of missing out. But I mean, you want to work with smart people who make up their own mind. So, I mean, like Adam, we just met for coffee for like an hour, 30 minutes or something. And then you went back and you read about it, and then he was like, I think this is cool. Like, I'll invest. Like, you just made a decision, and most VCs don't do that. Like, they can't make up their own mind, and they don't want to just write a check like that. So they take up tons of time to do it. And like Adam just made a decision. Like, those are the kind of investors you want to meet. So.
I'm wondering what your experience has been interacting with financial institutions, and what advice you might give to other Bitcoin companies.
Yeah, so that's like definitely a hard problem, and essentially, like if we have a strategy, the strategy is to cultivate legitimacy and try to be in it for the long term. So if it takes you like a year to get that deal done or whatever and get some bank partner, that's fine. Like mentally commit yourself ahead of time to being willing to build a relationship, help them get comfortable. They might ask you to do some crazy steps, like give us like a $500,000 collateral account if you want us to turn this on, or you need to go do some crazy registration thing, or but anything you can do to cultivate legitimacy. Like bankers are, when they're meeting with you, I guess like the subtext of the conversation is just like they want to see if you're going to screw them or not. So it could be like shaving that day, or like wearing, and I'm not, your beard is badass, so I'm not saying that, but like me, I'm kind of unshaven today, right? Like if I was meeting with bankers today, I probably like wouldn't go like this, and I would like maybe button the top button, go, sorry, moving the mic. What else? I mean, I think I was prepared to, like if I couldn't find a bank partner in the US, I was gonna go to like Singapore or Hong Kong. That was my next step because I think they were more open to it. But basically we like to say this too internally, is like run through brick walls. So like if you call 10 people and they all say no, like get mad. Like I am going to find a bank partner. I don't care what the fuck it takes. Like I'll go to Hong Kong if you guys don't want to do it. And then I'm going to get you in a year from now. You know what I mean? Because it's like you don't see it yet, but I do. Like I'm still going to get you to be my bank partner, even if it takes a year. So I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah. What's up? Speaking of people who work with a lot of banks.
So Bitcoin is interesting because you deal with money, and the community and individuals you deal with can at times be hostile.
Yeah.
What interesting things have you had to deal with and put in place to deal with overly hostile users or individuals who, are convinced that they're always right, or funds and things like that?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious what your stories are now. So we definitely have like overzealous customers, and people get really mad about money stuff when it doesn't work right. Like the hardest stuff we had to do was like just phone support. For a while, my phone number was on our account with the bank, and people would get that number. I was getting like 30 or 40 calls a day from people that were angry about that. And then I finally got them to change the number on the bank and all these things. But I think I still have emotional scars from some of those conversations. No joke. People can be really mean on the phone, and they're so basically I don't do phone. We don't do phone support at Coinbase anymore. Maybe
the backlash or
backlash from that?
I mean, obviously those people probably just stop using your service, but can you trace any okay, we had 10 really bad phone calls, or maybe 100 people left voicemails, and then we saw our usage go down? I guess we had such that spike period, that probably massive by 100,000 other people using things.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't really have any good baseline to measure whether it went up or down. But are you basically asking whether phone support might be worth it or not? How we thought about it?
Just how do you rationalize having a wall between you and your customers and still go forward and say, yeah, we're doing something right?
I guess the way I think about it is, does your customer have something like a really urgent situation that could come up? Then you should probably, if it's not, and I'll give you an example. So Airbnb does phone support because sometimes you show up at this house and it's 2 a.m. in New York and the host is not there. So they need phone support. Square doesn't do phone support because it's annoying if someone's trying to swipe their card on your app, but is it an emergency? Not really. I mean, it's a bad user experience. So we kind of thought about it like that. At Coinbase, is there an emergency that comes up? I mean, we definitely will inconvenience people if something's broken for an hour, or they can't get a response for 12 hours or something. But we haven't seen a situation yet where it was an emergency, someone was stranded or something like that. The other way we've thought about it too is, because basically, I don't know if you guys feel this way. I hate calling phone support. Most people who are tech savvy, you know, if the only time you call phone support is like a last resort, it's like, oh my God, it's gonna be such a waste of time. So the people who tend to call are people who just like don't have that much, they have like a lot of free time. And when I was at Airbnb, we spent a whole bunch of time optimizing support because it was one of the highest costs in the business. And we actually like did a bunch of split tests on, say, like chat versus email versus phone. And the number of requests per hour that an agent can satisfy over chat, which is also instant if they have a mobile device and all that, is like, I forget what the number was, but you can do you're like something like 10x as efficient as doing phone support. Because like an agent can have 4 chat windows open at once. There's like a delay between the typing, you know, and like somebody on the phone could just they monopolize your time, right? And they want to learn all about Bitcoin. So I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be saying that as a founder, like you're supposed to be all customer centric or whatever, but I don't know, like Gmail doesn't have phone support, right? Google kind of had that mentality of like, we build great tools for people who kind of know what they're doing, and if you're not that tech savvy, like we'll make good articles for you, but we're not going to like answer our phone, and it's a largely free product too. So I don't know, that's kind of where we drew the line. Urgency and like if your business model can support it, like so. If you're high volume, low margin, maybe it's not a good idea. If you're low volume, really high margin, then like enterprise sales or something, then yeah, you got to get on the phone. Yeah.
So back on the subject of money and running things that are constantly under attack.
Yeah.
What do you do to allow yourself to not wake up at 6 in the morning, like in panic that you've just had all your money stolen or everyone's Bitcoin's account?
Yeah.
To the extent that you can talk about these things, like what is it that gives you comfort? Like,
Yeah.
You know that's okay. You know, I'm going to go to sleep and I wake up and it's not just everything's over.
Yeah. So I remember last summer, you know, we started off with like 100% of funds live on the server, and I was thinking like, all right, well, we can just cover it with what's in our bank balance because this is like a launch prototype thing, and like the amount of funds on deposit started growing really fast, and so we had this moment where we're like, all right, we need to do the offline storage solution, and that was like the thing that allowed me to sleep again at night for a long time, and I guess still. But yeah, so we basically took 90% of the funds that were live on the site and we put them on encrypted USB drives and paper backups in bank safe deposit boxes at physical banks. So even if somebody just like completely owned our servers, they could at most get 10% of funds. And we've been slowly like dialing that down just because the day-to-day volume that transfers on the site is usually like less than 5%. We've had a couple times where we had to run to the bank to like restore funds from offline back to the server, like when there was a big sell-off or something like that. But in general, that has helped me sleep at night a lot. And then I guess one other thing we did that that helped, I think, a lot with my comfort on the security of the site was we released a white hat page, coinbase.com/whitehat, where you can do security researchers can do responsible disclosure to you of vulnerabilities. And we pay them 5 Bitcoin if they find a vulnerability on the site that is of sufficient severity, which is it's up to us to decide. But we're like pretty liberal about paying it out. And it's really cool. Like I had no idea what the response would be from that, but we didn't even announce it or anything. And like one guy in the security community tweeted it or something, and we had probably like 100 submissions from these guys like all over the world who they just love this stuff. Like and they would almost do it for free, like or for the recognition. And I go look at a lot of these guys, like their blog and their Twitter page and stuff now, and it says like, I'm like one of the security researchers listed on the awards page at Coinbase. Like they have that on their Twitter profile. So, and we do list them. We give attribution if anybody finds something. And most of the stuff they've found has been things like cross-site scripting, which could be used to like trick some users. And it wouldn't have been like a catastrophic loss. But I love the fact that we have like this army of guys just like, and I see them trying to find holes in the site all the time. Like we get scans that come through, people using scanning tools that'll blow up our inbox with the errors, and like people trying to inject all kinds of things into the database and everything. It's like that helps me sleep a lot. And we've been trying to, just because like whenever they find something, you know, I know nobody else can find it after that. So we were trying to hire a director of security too for about like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And we've interviewed we had like 3 or 4 pretty serious candidates that we got farther along with. And in that kind of referring back to the point I talked about earlier about hiring slowly, we just haven't found somebody like we wanted to pull the trigger with. Nobody that was like a hell yes. A lot of people that were really good, like senior people at other companies that I was like surprised they would even interview with us, you know. But yeah, we still have a lot of work to do to get farther along. Like I think we're going to try to do insured accounts at some point, and that would be pretty huge. But I guess there's no silver bullet. Like it still worries me. So yeah.
Do you see cryptocurrencies as something that will replace central banks or government sponsored reserve currency, or is it something that you think can coexist or even complement that system in the midterm, near midterm?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, so it's early days. It's really hard to say, right? But I think something has been sparked right now where it seems pretty clear it's going to play a major role in the world. And in my mind, I think of it like a probability spectrum because like the future is uncertain, right? So like on the lower end of the spectrum, it's likely that, you know, high net worth individuals with some diversified portfolio are going to hold some percent of their net worth like in these digital currencies in the future. And they are like a great value store, sort of like a modern day gold, but it's distributed and you can actually use it as a payment method conveniently as well. So that strikes me as like a lower bound on likelihood of outcome. But it's kind of like, again, being like looking at TCP/IP and saying like trying to predict Twitter or like Facebook being invented. So my belief, like my suspicion, is that there's something much bigger than that that's going to happen. It's actually going to revolutionize like payments. And I do feel like the concept of a bank is going to be like a very fluid thing in people's minds in the future. It's not going to be like, you know, those pillars with like the triangle on top that our parents think of. Like I don't really go to bank branches ever. It's sort of weird how many bank branches there are just like taking up prime real estate in San Francisco on the corner, you know, and it's like there's no reason those really need to exist. So yeah, if you look out like 10 years, I think you could see people only holding like a digital currency as their only bank, really. Like imagine if we, you know, launched a Bitcoin debit card or something like that, and you could just use your Bitcoin at any location or merchant who accepted it, right? And that could be like a domino falling in that direction. So the future is unknown, but something tells me it's going to be pretty game changing for a lot of industries. Yeah.
So what is your vision for Coinbase, for the future of Coinbase?
Yeah, so the overarching goal is just to make Bitcoin easy to use, make it accessible to consumers, businesses who want to use it. And really, our belief was that this new technology had been invented, and a whole bunch of innovation was going to be sparked by that. And it was like this fast, cheap international payment network. And if we could just make it easy to use, we could basically ride that wave, you know? So I think we weren't even really trying to like create our own wave. A lot of startups are trying to do that. We're just trying to ride one that's already happening, if that makes sense. So that was the gist of our idea. Bring PayPal or bring Bitcoin to the masses, kind of like the PayPal of Bitcoin. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
So far, what's been, I guess, the worst time you've had in your startup, and what's been like the best time?
Yeah. So, I mean, the worst time was probably breaking up with a co-founder last year, like during the summer. And just like some of those dark days where like we couldn't scale and like everybody on the internet seemed to hate us and say like we should shut down. And yeah, those were probably the worst times. And then the best times were like occasionally like we'll just have days or moments where we kind of like look around and we're like, holy shit, we leveled up in life, kind of, you know? like last year, like sometimes weird stuff like that will happen. Like you'll have a day where like, I don't know, like the CEO of Stripe will just be like, dude, you want to like grab lunch? And then later we'll go, I don't know, do an interview with like Wall Street Journal or something. And then like that night, somebody else like interesting will just like Dropbox will email and be like, hey, we're thinking about accepting Bitcoin. And I'm like, fuck, dude. Like, I was like just an employee at a company like last year. So that would have never happened, you know? So sometimes there's cool days like that. Yeah.
Right.